back down to mid-50s and patchy fog rolling in. Time now for the Saturday special on KSCO.
Don't miss the next Saturday special, because you never know what you might hear. For instance, it's...
No, we don't want to play that. We want to play this.
Good morning, a brighter day is here. Good morning, may we bring you cheer.
We've got time, we've got tunes, we've got time, tunes, and temperature.
Get up and go, it's today, you know, on KSCO Radio.
Are we going to have a special, Saturday special today? Why, do you ask, are we going to have a Saturday special that's special today? We're going to talk about a technical subject, and we're going to make that technical subject understandable so that even I can understand it. So stay with us.
Good morning, now stay right here on KSCO Radio.
Because Dr. and Mrs. Future, Dr. and Mrs. Future are here.
Hey.
Good morning.
Wait a second.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And since both of you are seasoned talk hosts, I want you to take over the program for about a minute or two while I go in and talk to Josh Stevens and give him some vital information. Okay? You guys can do that.
Sure.
Okay?
Oh.
And I'm going to be listening to the extent that I can while you're doing that. And if I have anything to add when I come back, I'll add it.
Should we intro our guest?
Yeah, intro our guest. Tell the story about, you know what, I'll start the story and then you can.
Okay, cool.
Okay, good. We're having two special guests today. And we have two special hosts to introduce one of the special guests to me. Okay. All right. And that special guest is Dr. Bruce Lipton. Now, you may or may not have heard of, if you've listened to the Dr. Future show, of course you've heard of Dr. Lipton, who has written a book, The Biology of Belief, Unleashing the Power of Consciousness, Matter, and other stuff, right? Oh, my God, look at this book. This is a heavy book. It's not a particularly thick book, but it's a very heavy book. What do you have in here, iron?
A lot of words for the same price. So I have more words per dollar in that book.
All right. So I am going to introduce, your name came up on the Dr. Future show that I listened to the tail end of this last week. Mm-hmm. And I said, I know that name. Now, you and I had never met, but I had heard your name from my good buddy, Dr. Wallach, who has mentioned your name many times on the air, even nationally on the Coast to Coast show with George Norrie. And you and Doc Wallach, though you had never met, have something very much in common, and that is you are both considered the fathers of the science of epigenetics. Doc Wallach has written a book that was published several years ago called Epigenetics, The Death of the Genetic Theory of Disease Transmission.
Wonderful story.
Okay.
Doc Wallach has got his hands on the pulse of what's going on in the newest biology. And this is so important because epigenetics, people may have heard the word, but may not understand the powerful meaning of what epigenetics is about. So
That's a mind-body connection, right?
it is the mind-body connection, and it's interesting because almost everybody out there has been programmed with the belief that genes turn on and off, and genes control the character of your life. When I was teaching that in a medical school, I look back and say, what was I actually teaching? And I was teaching victimization, meaning, as far as we know, we didn't pick the genes we came with. If we don't like the characteristics, we can't change the genes. And then, most importantly, we're told that the genes turn on and off independently of us, and
So
then all of a sudden
they turn on and off depending on typically by environmental influences.
well,
right?
this is what epigenetics is all about. Before it was just a gene turned on and a gene turned off, and then we gave power to the gene to control our lives. And then you go back and say, well, as I said, we didn't pick them, can't change them. We become victims of our heredity. So people talk about, oh my God, cancer's running in the family, must be a cancer gene, or Alzheimer's running in the family, Alzheimer's gene, or diabetes. And it turns out these are totally false assumptions.
Even though that's mostly what people believe to this day.
Well, that's the problem. Science has moved ahead. The public is still left behind. Personally, I've been involved in the field for 40-some years now, 50 years. I find it very interesting because I believe that keeping the old story of victimization is what allows empowerment by others over us. I'm a victim of my genes. I can't do anything about that. Let me find an expert. Let me pay somebody else to fix me. And that's where the idea is I'm powerless in my own life. And epigenetics completely turns that story around and says that, in fact, we are masters of our genetics. We control our biology, and that consciousness and environment are the two primary inputs to this. And this is why Dr. Joel Wallach and I are here today, because while I talk about the influence of consciousness, Dr. Wallach talks about the influence of the environment, especially minerals and trace elements. So we're both talking about the same thing, but from two slightly different perspectives. Both represent environment, but different aspects of that.
And speaking of Doc Wallach, he is on the line here. We had a technical glitch or two, but Doc, welcome to the Saturday Special. You've been a guest on this program umpteen times over the last quarter century. But it's a pleasure for me to host a program with the co-fathers of the science of epigenetics. So.
Okay, well, thank you for the kind words, Michael, and always good to talk with you, Bruce.
Joel, I want to say how I just found out today that we were doing this work at exactly the same time back in the late 60s. So without knowing that we were both working toward the same end from different perspectives, and yet we both come to the same valuable conclusion of we have power over our lives.
Absolutely. You get an A+ because that is a completely true statement. And I have dealt with this in more than 50 countries. And of course, my thesis on 20,000 autopsies says the same thing. It's in the Smithsonian Institute as a national treasure because they showed there are no genetically transmitted diseases. There are no genetically transmitted birth defects. It's all environment, a.k.a. nutrition, biochemistry, and can't thank you enough for all the work you do.
Who came up with the term epigenetics? And what would have, and this is a two-part question, and what would have happened if there was no Dr. Wallach or no Dr. Lipton? What would have happened? Would there be no epigenetics, or would someone else have figured it out? Sort of a dumb question, but I can't help but ask it.
Dr. Wallach, let's hear from you.
Okay, well, I think eventually somebody would have figured it out. You go back to, say, 10,000 years ago, everybody knew that the spring fever was due to an evil spirit. And that went on for 10,000 years until an 18-year-old medical student came along in India by the name of, Randall Ross. I think his name was Randall Ross. And he had access to the microscope. and he looked at the red blood cells from people with the spring fever, and he saw this little black parasite in the red blood cells, and then he killed a bunch of mosquitoes because he thought in his mind that it has to be transmitted by something. So he killed 8, actually by actual count, 8 mosquitoes, smashed them, look at them under the microscope. He could see blood cells from people who had the spring fever with that little black dot in it, and he wrote it up in an English medical journal. That was in 1895. It had gone on for 10,000 years. Healers knew that it was the spring fever was due to an evil spirit, and he found the parasite. But it took, and then from 1635, they'd been using quinine from the chinchona bark from Peru to kill the spring fever, but the same person would get it again next spring, okay, because the quinine only worked for that one event. Well, 1939, another medical student by the name of Paul Mueller from Sweden was a chemist, and he came up with DDT, which all the environmentalists hate. He came up with DDT as an insecticide and sprayed all the swamps with the insecticide DDT. In 6 months' time, malaria disappeared because he interrupted the life cycle of the malaria parasite by killing the transmitter, the vector.
Well, okay, so you're in your book, which I guess came out, in 2011, is that right? Oh, no, that was the award. You wrote the Epigenetics, but you're always writing a book, Dr. Wallach. As long as I've known you, you have at least one book, in process at every moment. And I'm looking at this copyright 2014. Okay, so this is a 6-year-old book, and people actually come to the Dave Cave here at KSCO, and when they purchase their supplements, sometimes they purchase books that Dave has on in supply here. But I want to get into the science itself. Okay, now when I was out, I said I was going to be able to listen. I wasn't able to listen. Al, did you, Dr. Future? Were you able to tell the history?
We started getting into with the mind-body connection and epigenetics as an
okay, and it
approach.
turned out that you and Bruce, you and Mrs. Future and Bruce Lipton have been friends for years. I had no idea.
Yeah,
and it also turns out that Dr. Lipton is a Santa Cruz area resident.
Right. Yeah, and who almost lost his house.
Yeah. Jeez.
Up in Bonnie Doon.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's true. And I also, Bruce, I've known him through the Institute of Noetic Sciences and the scientists that are part of that cabal, if you will. And
Noetic science.
Yes, astronaut Edgar Mitchell's started that group. It's up in Sonoma County.
It's the science of knowing how do we know.
Yeah.
How do we know what we know? That's noetics.
Mind-body stuff, really connecting. And Bruce has been very active in that community for many years as well.
And now, Bruce, you've written a number of books besides this, or is this your?
I have 2 other books: Spontaneous Evolution and a book called The Honeymoon Effect.
Okay, so who gave the name? Who coined the term epigenetics?
Well, epigenetics was used in a different form a while back. Joel, do you remember who that scientist was? He talked about hills and valleys. I can't remember right offhand. The word epigenetics had a different sense of meaning to it. But in 1990, science took that epigenetic meaning and then defined it as the influence of environment and controlling the activity and the expression of genes. Yeah, it was, thank you, Dr. Future. Dr. C.H. Waddington. He came up with the term years ago, but it's a little different, his definition, than what we're talking about in today's world of epigenetics.
And Doc, over the many years that I've known you and worked with you, I never heard that term until fairly recently, and then before I knew it, you had written a book on it.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where if you just break it down into the parts, epi means above genetics, okay? Epi means above genetics. And so it's one of those things where your genes are kind of like a script, okay? But you can edit a script at any time, and of course, that's the whole idea here. And that's for doing all these autopsies, and I've worked with people all over the world, 50 different countries, and everybody gets the same disease from the same environmental problem. Whether they're in Africa, which I spent 2 years there out in the bush, lived in the bush for 2 years with the Zulus, okay? So I learned a lot, very primitive medicine back then. But they would get arthritis, they would get high blood pressure, and they would get diabetes. And none of those are genetic. I'll repeat that. None of those are genetic. All the diseases that the medical system says are genetic, which translate to we have no earthly idea what causes it, so we're going to blame it on your genes.
Well, you know, one of the parts that was helping them come to that conclusion is that many of the diseases you just described, Dr. Wallach, are diseases that run in families. And so science looking at genetics is what connects the family members, you know, parents to sibling, to their children, et cetera. So it was so easy for them just to say, oh, well, if it's being passed from generation to generation, it was likely something involving the heredity. And now we know that's not true at all. In fact, there are other influences, primary influences that shape us that are not genetics at all, and epigenetics emphasizes those.
That's correct. And of course, let's just take, you know, the metabolic syndrome here with obesity and diabetes. Let's just take those two. And I have another book out on that one called Hell's Kitchen, because the kitchen can be a place of heaven or hell depending on what you do in there. Okay, so Hell's Kitchen, the book, and Hell's Kitchen, the CD, deals with obesity and type 2 diabetes, both of which are just simple nutritional deficiency diseases. When people are deficient in certain minerals, they get a behavior called pica, P-I-C-A, and Grandma would go out in the backyard and eat dirt with a spoon, or she'd eat the wood ashes out of the stove when she had pica. And there were no calories in wood ashes or dirt, and so Grandma didn't gain weight. The babies would chew on the top rail of their crib when they came out with the baby formulas and only had 3 minerals in there. So the babies were immediately deficient in minerals. They would chew on the crib, and they called it cribbing, okay, because they were deficient in these minerals. So some clever guy said, you know, we're losing a lot of money here. We need to come up with some snacks. So when people have this desire to eat dirt, there's money in it for us for them eating dirt. We'll come up with pretzels and potato chips and corn puffs and cupcakes and cookies, and we'll sell them that when they have this craving, this pica, and we'll make money. So that's where the whole snack food industry came in. And before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, on Pearl Street in New York City, on the bluff overlooking the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge, when Thomas Edison pulled the switch in the first commercial electric generating plant, the only fat person you could see would be in the circus. You know, they'd say, come see the fat lady. She's 200 pounds. Well, I deal with women and men who now are 500, 600 pounds every month, okay, because they're minerally deficient. And when you get this behavior, pica, okay, because we don't have wood ashes anymore, we have electricity, right? And so they're looking for something to satisfy that craving, and they eat stuff that has calories in it. So we give them minerals in our weight loss program. We give them minerals to satisfy their pica. There's no calories in minerals. And they lose weight to the tune of a half a pound to 2 pounds per day. And usually in 3 to 4 to 5 months, they're down from 500 pounds to 130 pounds where they need to be.
Well, you know, Dr. Wallach, this is fully an accurate understanding of the nature part of epigenetics. I also connected with it in a slightly different way. Let me just review essentially what I did back in 1967. I was cloning stem cells, which are embryonic cells that are in all of our bodies. And when I was cloning them, I put one cell in a dish by itself, and then it divides every 10 or 12 hours. And after 1 week, I've got about 30,000 cells in that Petri dish. But the most important point about cloning is that all the cells are genetically identical. So then I take these 30,000 cells, split them up into 3 Petri dishes, and in the lab, we grow the cells in what is called culture medium, and this is where our work comes together here on the nature of culture medium. I say, well, what is culture medium? I say that's the laboratory version of blood. So that in the lab, we would create synthetic blood called culture medium, and we use this to grow the cells. Since I'm creating in the lab, of course, I had the opportunity to change some of the constituents a little bit. So now let's look at the experiment. 3 dishes of cells, all the cells in all the dishes are genetically identical, but I feed them 3 different versions of culture medium, essentially 3 different versions of blood. And in one dish, the cells form muscle. In another dish, the cells form bone. In a third dish, the cells form fat cells. And then you're left to explain this, what happened here. Well, of course, we always jump to genes must have done this, but the fact was all the cells had the exact same genes. So it wasn't the genes that differentiated one cell type from another cell. It was the composition of the culture medium. And so then I say, well, let's take that back into the human for a second. And I say, what I was just discussing were cells in a plastic dish fed with artificial blood. But a human is, I like to jokingly say, a human is a skin-covered petri dish with 50 trillion cells inside, and the original culture medium, blood. And I say it doesn't make a difference if the cells in the plastic dish or in the human body. It's the chemical composition of the blood that determines the fate of the cells. Now, I divided that into 2 aspects of blood. One is the nutritional elements of blood. Of course, that's profoundly important, and that's the avenue and direction that you were emphasizing. But I also recognize that blood contains chemistry like hormones and growth factors and regulatory agents, released by the brain to coordinate the functions of the body. So I have nutrition and information in blood simultaneously. What your work significantly emphasized was that the nutritional composition was profoundly important in determining the genetic activity of those cells. And meanwhile, I took the other tact of looking at the information molecules, such as the hormones or emotional chemicals, as influencing the cells as well. And then we come to the most important conclusion, blood is providing nutrition and information. If the nutrition's off, then the cells are not going to develop healthfully or normally. If the information is off, it will result in the same thing. So all of a sudden it says there are 2 different ways of showing how the environment, be it the nutrition that we eat, which is profoundly important, as well as our conscious processing environment, which leads to the changes of chemistry from the brain, both of these. So interesting, this is where we come together. It's that composition of the blood that ultimately controls genetics, and that's where epigenetics comes from, because it's the blood above the genes that determines the fate of the cells, not the genes alone. So as you gave an example, of course, about the nutritional thing, I'd like to give one simple example, which is profoundly important, because we've always said cancer is caused by genes. I would like to state here that that's a totally false fact. There is no gene that causes cancer. Genes are correlated with cancer, but not causative of cancer. And a wonderful, simple observation revealed this, and that was scientists started to follow the fate of children adopted into families where cancer was running in that family lineage. And they found that the adopted children would get the very same familial cancer that the natural siblings had when adopted in that family. Most important fact, though, the adopted child has totally different genetics. So blaming the cancer on the genes is no, it's in a large part about lifestyle, which includes nutrition, of course. And so this is where our work becomes entangled, and it's so important because both of our perspectives are required to fully understand the nature of that epigenetics.
Doc, over the years,
well said.
Over the years, I've heard you say many, many times that a disease that is thought to have a genetic origin is not genetic at all. It's a pure nutritional deficiency. I've heard you say that over and over and over again. I've never asked you the simple question I'm going to ask you now. Are there any diseases that are strictly genetic in nature?
Not when you ask it that way, no. Of course, genes require nutrients to perform, and of course, stem cells are very important. There's stem cells, as Bruce points out, for every tissue, every organ, and so forth. And this is where we come from, is to give the nutrients to those stem cells. For instance, let's just look at the COVID-19 thing right now, which is an infection. Okay, and you look at rich people like Herman Cain, a billionaire from Godfather Pizza, 74 years old, and he dies 30 days after he's diagnosed because he had 8 different pre-existing conditions, which were all nutritional deficiency diseases, and they just gave him oxygen and a drug to kill a viral infection. When they did the autopsy on him 30 days after he died, in 30 days after they started treatment, okay, a billionaire, and this just happened a month ago, okay? And so when they did the autopsy on him, all his capillaries were full of little blood clots of red blood cells, which were enlarged. The red blood cells were enlarged, which says to me vitamin B12 deficiency, okay, when the red blood cells are enlarged. And they were plugging up all the capillaries in his lungs, and that's why he had respiratory distress. He did not have a viral lung infection, and he was obese. You could just tell by looking at the pictures of him. He was 50 pounds overweight at least. Which is one of those pre-existing conditions that is a nutritional deficiency. And so how does that make you die from COVID? Well, your immune system is in your bone marrow, and if you can't absorb nutrition, if you can't use nutrition to make white blood cells, T lymphocytes, which are the big, powerful cavalry and the Marines going through the bloodstream to kill and eat the viruses, it's because you have a problem with your intestines. And this is where the gluten comes in. It damages the intestine. It's not an all or nothing thing. It's not on, off. It's a drip, drip, drip. That's why 3-year-old babies, when they get COVID, they get a mild common cold symptom for 3 days, and it's over with for them, no problem. When a 63-year-old gets it, you get serious complications. 73-year-old, like Herman Cain, when he got it, he got serious complications, and he died because his bone marrow was totally dead. He couldn't make platelets because his bone marrow was dead. He couldn't make white blood cells. So all these little red blood cells were blocking his capillaries and couldn't transmit oxygen around. And so just that simple little piece there, because his bone marrow was dead, because for 73 years he was eating what? Oh, Godfather's Pizza. The crust is made from what? Gluten alert. Gluten alert.
Can I add to that? I would like to add to that because yes, there's a nutritional contribution which you emphasize, and that's very accurate in its understanding. Now, again, remember I said I look at it from the information molecules coming into that blood as well. And one of the most important facts that have been left out of this is that stress causes the secretion of cortisol, the stress hormone. And I say, well, yeah, that's an information molecule. I say, what information is it providing? And it says that when a person's under stress, they have to switch their biology from growth to a protection posture. And in a protection posture, what that means is we get ready for fight or flight. That's the adrenal system, fight or flight, which involves the use of the arms and legs as the source of survival. And so when stress hormones are released into the body, their main function is also to redirect the flow of the blood to the arms and legs preferentially, because blood being the source of energy will engage those muscles and allow the individual to escape or fight or whatever necessary to survive. And I say, well, what do you mean the blood goes preferentially to the arms and legs? Where was it before? And the answer is, when we're not in a state of stress, the blood is primarily concentrated in the viscera, the organs in the gut, which are involved with growth and maintenance and fixing and cleaning and taking care of the body. And I say, well, if you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, it's not necessary to use that energy for fixing the body because if you don't escape, there's no body left anyway. So basically, the system shuts down the viscera because stress hormones shut off the blood supply to the gut, which then forces extra blood to the arms and legs. However, the most important part of this as well is the immune system is protection as well as the adrenal, but the immune system is protection of the inside of the body, and the adrenal system is protect us from the external threats. And I go, so what does that mean? If I have a bacterial infection and a saber-toothed tiger is chasing me as, involved in the economy of the system, how much of the energy should I fight the bacteria, and how much of the energy should I use to run away from the tiger? Well, it comes down to a very simple thing. The hell with the bacteria. because if the tiger catches you, that's not a problem anymore. And I say, so what is the relevance? Well, the immune system uses a lot of energy. People, when they get sick, sometimes don't even have the energy to get out of bed. And I say, well, again, should I use that energy if I'm being chased by a tiger to fight the bacteria, or should I use that energy to run away? Well, obviously, the heck with the bacteria. And so my point after all of that was stress hormones not only shut down the functions of the gut, which maintain our growth and maintenance, but stress hormones shut off the immune system as an effort to conserve energy. And it's interesting, the stress hormones are so effective at shutting off the immune system that medical doctors give patients about to receive a foreign organ or a graft, give the patient before the transplant the stress hormones. That inhibits the immune system in the recipient of that foreign tissue, and that allows the recipient not to immediately reject the foreign graft. So if I can shut off the immune system, then I can put in a foreign graft and help it from being rejected. And I go, so what's relevant? I say, because today's world, stress is now recognized to be responsible for up to 90% of illness, including almost all of the vascular diseases and other elements. And yet, it's not stress alone, as you brought in. It's the nutritional aspect that also is engaged. So again, epigenetics is revealing there's a two-prong approach here. Understanding A, the nutritional element of your blood, and B, understanding the informational element, which is also controlling genetics. Both of them influence the fate of our cells.
Yeah, well, again, I give you an A+ for translating all that. And then, but I'm going to say, what do the adrenal glands require? What does the spleen require? What do your intestines require to create the stress hormones? The stress hormones just aren't made from vapors. Okay?
No, not at all.
Okay, there's raw materials there.
Yes.
Plus, the machinery of the adrenal glands require raw materials, okay? And without these raw materials, they cannot make the stress hormones or the anti-stress hormones. They cannot call up the white blood cells. They can't do that part of the deal. And so nutrition is always involved, whether it's the information side or the biochemical side. Nutrition is always involved because even your adrenal glands, even your brain requires nutrients to do their job. You shut off the nutrition to the brain, you're dead. You shut off the nutrition to your adrenal glands, you wind up with all these weird things that go on because you can't protect yourself, from the environment, such as saber-toothed tigers, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And so, and so this is where I've learned to come in and say, okay, a family, you got 5 generations of people with type 2 diabetes. Is it genetic? No. It's not environmental because the great-great-grandchild here learned from grandmother who learned from mother how to cook, what to cook. And if they live in the same place, nutritional minerals do not occur in a uniform blanket around the crust of the earth. Nutritional minerals occur in veins like chocolate and chocolate ice cream. They occur in veins like gold and silver and coal. And any doctor who would tell a person who says, should I be taking some vitamins and minerals here? My immune system is down. All this COVID thing running around. Shouldn't I support myself a little bit with some vitamins and minerals? And the doctor will say, do not waste your money on vitamins and minerals. Okay? Just what you want to do here is, make sure you get your drugs because you get everything you need from just eating well. If you just eat well, you're going to get everything you need. And that would be like a mechanic telling the owner of a brand new exotic car, like a Jaguar. I want this Jaguar to go 300,000 miles, and so I want the very best oil to put in it. What oil do I put in? And the mechanic will say, don't waste your money on oil in that Jaguar. Don't waste your money on oil. Just put dirt from Texas in there. There's bound to be some oil in that dirt from Texas, and that's only 10 cents a quart, as opposed to $3 a quart for the expensive oil. Well, an insane person would run away from that mechanic But when a doctor says, oh, just eat while you get everything you need, people beat their chest and says, my doctor says I can get everything I need just from eating well. To hell with your vitamins and minerals, and then they die.
I fully agree with that. And actually, the analogy you gave is really critical, because earlier you said, well, the parent teaches the child learns from, and how that influences their life. Let's go back to the same analogy you had about the vehicle. Now, I could put all the right oil in there, and I could put all the right pieces and parts in there, but if I had some really bad driver education, then I could screw that car up no matter how healthy the engine was running, because of the way I drive. And in fact, most of the cars in a junkyard are there because not of vehicle failure, but more driver error. So again, that brings in the fact that, yeah, I can have the most healthy body in the world, but if my driving skills, so to speak, are not adequate, even a healthy person would die at that point. So either or, rather, is this the one, or is this the one? Is it the nutrition, or is it the consciousness? I really, that's why I keep coming back. I say both of these aspects are required to have a healthy, functioning system that can thrive on this planet. So again, I like the idea. Let's agree on this, that both the education and the nutrition are critically important for the survival of our body vehicles.
I was a little concerned when we came up with the idea of doing this program that it might be a little too technical for our audience. And I don't think that's the case. We aren't getting any phone calls now, but I haven't invited them.
Oh.
I want to invite them. Why not invite? If you want to chip into the conversation, the number to use is the on-air number for KSCO. That's 831-479-1080. If you have a question or a comment to add to the discussion, you can do it either on the telephone or by sending an email to mz@ksco.com. And our guests today are Dr. Joel Wallach and Dr. Bruce Lipton. The topic is epigenetics, and quite possibly next hour we might broaden the topic into what's happening in our world from your perspectives.
Yes,
Go ahead,
I want to say one of the important things that Bruce has pointed out is the impact of negative thoughts on your health and well-being. And I just, if you could just say a moment on that, Bruce.
Well, yeah, I mean, before we talk about the influence of negative thoughts, biology, when it was first founded as a science, was a Newtonian-based science that said there's matter and there's energy, but they don't interact, and the body's made out of matter, so if you want to fix the body, use matter to fix the body.
i.e. drugs.
Pharmaceutical company, okay?
Yeah.
But then, about 100 years ago, they found something called the placebo effect, which really threw a monkey wrench in the system, because they found that people could heal themselves with the belief that a new pill or a new therapy was what was going to really fix them. And that belief system healed them in spite of the fact that either the therapy was a sham or that that pill was a sugar pill. And it comes down to, well, then what was healing those people? And then it was like, oh my goodness, it was their consciousness of belief about the treatment. And everyone, oh yeah, positive belief about the pill will help you heal. And what we left out, and the public has not really followed in because we haven't talked about it, is, yeah, positive thinking is the foundation of the placebo effect. Yeah. What about negative thinking? And we've left that out of the story, but now we recognize negative thinking is responsible for something called the nocebo effect. And the nocebo effect is negative thinking can cause any disease. It can even cause death. People can be scared to death. And all of a sudden it says, oh my God, then thinking, positive or negative, are influential in this process. But then that takes me back to the part that I studied, different than Dr. Wallach. I was studying, so what was the result of that thinking? How did that thinking manifest a change in the biology? And the answer is, thinking caused the release of specific hormones and growth factors, emotional chemicals, that in turn, when released into the blood, became part of that nutritional mix that determine the fate of the cells. So, for example, if a person closes their eyes and in their head imagines something they love, just that vision of love causes the release of some very wonderful chemicals in the body. Dopamine is pleasure, oxytocin bonding to that source of love, vasopressin is a chemical that makes you more attractive to your partner, and most importantly, growth hormone, which is, regulating a lot of the metabolism of the system, is also released in love. And that's why with that little cocktail of chemicals from the brain, that's why people glow when they're in love. They're so healthy, they're so vibrant, and everything is exciting. And I go, and in contrast, as we were talking about, what if there's a picture of fear? In the mind, I go, the chemicals of love are not going to be released. Now they're going to be stress hormones, hormones that control the immune system called cytokines. And I go, why is it relevant? Because that chemistry has a profoundly different response on the biology than the love chemistry. That stress chemistry is really fundamental in responsibility for the health issues we have on this planet. And this is especially why Americans are so susceptible to this COVID thing, because the stress levels are so great. And just to add to this, a very important fact about this, why do Americans have more mortality? And here's a fact of science.
You mean for COVID?
The COVID mortality, and the answer is because 60% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. And a chronic disease takes a lot of the strength out of the immune system as you're fighting something chronically. More importantly, 40% of Americans have 2 or more chronic diseases at the same time. There are many Americans that take like 5 pills a day to handle their stress issues in life. And I say, since stress hormones shut off the immune system, one chronic illness is already impairing your ability to help, your immune system. 2 chronic illnesses are almost like, you're in a lot of trouble now because your immune system is overtaxed even before the COVID got in there.
Yeah, the comorbidities, as they say.
Well, let me jump in here if I may. Okay, let me jump in at this point. Okay, and say, look. When you look at these people with these comorbidities, these pre-existing conditions, and we call them the metabolic syndrome, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease stuff, these are all nutritional deficiency diseases. Every one of those is a nutritional deficiency disease. And what happens here is your bone marrow also is not getting the nutrients necessary to make white blood cells and antibodies and the stem cells to make antibodies and your red blood cells and the platelets. And so you're going to get all this stuff going on. You're hemorrhage to death. You're going to get blood clots everywhere. And this is what kills people when they get the COVID, because they have these pre-existing conditions, all of which are nutritional deficiency diseases. Now, I'm going to give you a piece of data which is going to kind of support what you've been saying here, Bruce. This is from Johns Hopkins. This came out about 8 weeks ago. This study started in 2013, and they finished it up 8 weeks ago. And they were looking at the top 8 causes of death in American hospitals. The top 8 causes of death in American hospitals. Number 1, as you can imagine, was cardiovascular disease. But did they say everybody had a heart attack and they went to the hospital and died? Or did they have cardiovascular disease and went to the hospital and they died from infection, from a botched procedure? And the second one was cancer. Second out of the 8 was cancer. Did they have cancer and they run to the hospital and died from cancer in the hospital? Or did they get an infection from a botched surgery? Did radiation kill them? Okay. Number 3 was the one that I loved. Was medical errors. Number 3 was the biggest, third leading cause of death in American hospitals each year is medical errors. And remember, this is Johns Hopkins, not me. I'm reporting what they reported in medical journals 8 weeks ago. It was a big study since 2013. The number 3 killer in American hospitals is medical errors, and they said, which results in death, of, let's see here, they said the death of 251,000 to 440,000 people. Medical doctors kill each year in hospitals in their workplace 251,000 to 440,000 of their customers in their workplace, and they go out and have a hamburger. So how many businesses could stay in business if they kill 251,000 to 440,000 of their customers in their workplace? The medical system has missed it by 1,000 miles. And then I'll throw one more thing in here. Just 2 days ago, the Lancet, the famous British medical journal, came out and said, medical schools have failed us terribly, which you and I know that, Bruce. Medical schools have failed us terribly because they're just teaching all of their medical students to be pill pushers, to treat symptoms as opposed to getting to the actual root cause of the disease. Okay, and people are dying from the disease because they're not getting treated for the disease or getting treated for symptoms. That was the Lancet just a couple of days ago.
This is profoundly important. I'm glad you brought it up because what you're talking about is actually not even new information. In 2001, and it's interesting, the source is the Journal of the American Medical Association. Their own professional journal recognized that medicine indeed was the third leading cause of death. They put a Latin name on it so people don't understand. It's called iatrogenic illness. And it goes, ooh, that's really special. And it actually, as you translated just a minute ago, Dr. Wallach, you translated and said, yeah, medical error is responsible for this.
Iatrogenic, that's right.
And that was in 2001. And the British Medical Journal did the exact same review in 2016. So BMJ came out with the exact same conclusion nearly 20 years after. American medicine is still the third leading cause of death in the United States, and I fully and wholeheartedly support your assertion. Yeah, they're dealing with symptoms and not causes. And I say, well, what's the issue of dealing with symptoms and not causes? And in my book, I write, hey, listen, what are the gauges on your dashboard for? They tell you the operation of the system. And I say, when the service engine light comes on, it's a symptom that something is wrong. And I say, what is the analogy here? And I said, the analogy would be if the repairman just came and put masking tape over the service engine light and say, see, everything's better now. It's like, no, you didn't fix a damn thing. It's still the same problem. And so by covering up the symptoms, as you mentioned, it's exactly the same as putting the masking tape on the gauges. If I don't feel it, then I must be okay. And the problem is, no, actually, you'll probably make things worse and something else is going to show up to give you another chance. Your body is talking to you. A symptom is a gauge, a feedback that says something is going on. If, as you mentioned, and why I bring it back up again, because it is indeed the most important point. If I just treat the symptom, I never got to the cause of what was going on. And your work on selenium was one of the pivotal pieces of work that says, yeah, this symptoms, you're working on the symptoms. What about selenium? And most doctors are like, what are you talking about? And you had to, break into the system to get that point across. I'm sure they didn't on day one say, yes, Dr. Wallach, you're perfectly right. All of us should be taking selenium. I don't think that happened.
No, what happened was they fired me from Yerkes Primate Center in Atlanta, Georgia, because they said that cystic fibrosis was not a genetic disease as they believed. It was a deficiency disease, and the deficiency of selenium actually caused 2 of the 3 symptoms of cystic fibrosis, the liver and the pancreatic stuff. There's another nutrient deficiency that causes the lung stuff. And then muscular dystrophy is caused by deficiency of this mineral, selenium. And any farmer can't even read can go to a feed store and get an injectable bottle of selenium. And they have a calf that's born with muscular dystrophy and injects it into the calf and cures the calf in 30 minutes. And then when you have a kid who has muscular dystrophy, and Jerry Lewis spent 20 years of his life, I mean, he brought in $2 billion for the
muscular dystrophy.
Muscular Dystrophy Association. And I gave all these charts to Jerry that, we had cured over 50 of these kids, these Amish kids out in the Southwest. We cured them of muscular dystrophy and gave Jerry the charts. He got excited. He took them to the Muscular Dystrophy Association. They fired Jerry Lewis before he even walked out the door. And that was in 2011. And then he died. I have a broken heart, I'm sure. And then 5 years later, 2015, they shut off the telethon because they couldn't raise a penny without Jerry Lewis. Now, here comes the final story on this selenium thing. Now, Dr. Milan and I, we went to China, and we did 1,700 autopsies on kids that died of Keyshawn disease, which is the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart attack, okay? 35% had cystic fibrosis, 100% had muscular dystrophy, and 200 of them under the age of 1 year would have been diagnosed with sudden death syndrome here in the United States. Only 2% of the babies that die from sudden death syndrome are in bed with their mothers. 98% are not in bed with their mothers. I redid a bunch of those autopsies. None of them suffocated. They all died of this hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart attack under the age of 1 year. So we went to the federal courts. It was my number 10 lawsuit in federal courts, which we prevailed April 16, 2013. The federal judge ruled that this nutrient, selenium, had to be put into baby formulas like Enfamil and Similac, which they did. Bruce, a year and a half later, September 13th, shut off your phone, Michael.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. 2 years later, September 13th, 2014, big headlines in the Charlotte Observer newspaper. I mean, we're talking like Third World War. We don't know why, but sudden death syndrome has vanished from North Carolina. 3 months later, the same thing happened in the Missouri newspapers. We don't know why, but sudden death syndrome has vanished in the state of Missouri. And then 3 months later, every newspaper in the world said, we don't know why, but the diagnoses of sudden death syndrome has dropped dramatically by 85 to 95%. Well, that's because we put that nutrient in the baby formula. And so now if you think about it, have you heard much about cystic fibrosis in the last 5 to 10 years? No. What about muscular dystrophy? No. What about sudden death syndrome? No. Because by just putting that one nutrient in baby formula, I eliminated those 3 childhood diseases that killed millions before we put the nutrient in the baby formulas.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. There's a parallel with us. I think we're getting an indication here that I should shorten my sentence.
No, well, it's great. I'm happy that everybody's on a roll here, but guess what? We invited callers. Guess how many callers we have? It's
One?
blowing up the board. You know, and I want to take a couple of them now, and then promise the others that we'll be happy to continue this, and will into the next hour. So let's take our first caller, which will be Edward in Los Gatos. Hi, Edward in Los Gatos.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
Good. How are you? What's up?
Well, I'm doing well, and I just wanted to compliment you. The last few weeks, you have been on your shtick of you're losing it and you're not able to produce and yada yada. And this has got to be one of the best Saturday morning specials I've heard. And I've been following.
Thank God, I was so worried.
When you first put Doc on the air, I started listening, and I've been following him ever since. And
that
now
was
I have
that was November.
a new trophy.
That was September 15th, 1996. So we're coming up on 18 years. No, that's 24 years. Excuse me. Where's my? Yeah, I should retire because I can't subtract. But anyhow,
it was probably 97, 98 when I started listening to him there. But now I have a new trophy to put on my shelf, and that's Dr. Bruce. I think his side of the equation is just as important in the mathematics of this entire problem of health and wellness. And I just wanted to compliment you on putting this together and say hello to
Can we have you on as a fourth co-host on the program here? Because I love compliments. Anyhow, thank you very much, Edward. Appreciate it. Take care. Real quick, here's Shelley in Monterey. We'll hold you over, Shelley, if you need more time. But you're on the air now.
MZ, you nailed it. Oh, this is an excellent show. Dr. Lipton, Dr. Wallach, the Dr. Futures. The only one missing is Ben. Maybe you should have had Ben.
Right.
Well, too many cooks spoil the broth.
No, the broth is excellent. Oh, my gosh. And I just want to say to Dr. Lipton, thank you for breaking it down like that for laymen to understand. I mean, when I look at the immune system now and I look at the stress, the tiger chasing me or whatever, I look at it almost like a rolling blackout, right? With the PG&E doing the rolling blackouts. My immune system is going to black out because my adrenaline needs to pump up my arms and my legs for running and for fighting. So I really appreciate you breaking it down like that because that really, really it stimulated my thinking about it. And Dr. Wallach, I've been listening to you since 2014. And the first time I heard you was in the morning before I went to work. And I heard the short bio that you used to have on the radio of your upbringing and kind of like a short, brief story of how you came to your conclusions. And when I heard that morning, I stood up in my bed and I was just amazed because you're talking to a person that's had medical.
We're expecting the mid-70s, overnight temperatures back down to the mid-50s. 11:06 at KSCO. Let's begin hour 2 of the Saturday special.
Thank you, Josh Stevens. By the way, I thought I saw an apparition that resembled Dave Michaels. Is he here? Is he here in the Dave Cave?
I believe so.
Yeah, if he hears us, he can come on. But if not, that's okay. But I want to give the right information. Dave is at the Dave Cave with all the KSCO mineral store, and that it's open until 2:00 today, right? Yeah. Okay. If I'm wrong, he'll tell you. Okay.
You're correct.
Thumbs up. So that's correct. Okay. Very good. So let's get into hour number 2 of the KSCO Saturday special. And just to usher us into that, here is the famous music.
Oh, hello, darling. I hate to hang up on you, but I'm sorry, baby, but I have to go. It's time for that wonderful record show. I'd love to visit, but you'll have to call back. KSCO has the inside track.
Okay, we are having a rather spirited discussion on the topic of epigenetics on your favorite radio station.
I'm sorry, baby, but I really gotta go to KSCO Radio. Bye.
In the studio, we have Dr. Future, Dr. Lipton, Mrs. Future, and on the KSCO live line, we have Dr. Wallach. Are you there, Dr. Wallach?
I am here.
Okay, good. we have you on a different pot this time. So, let's see. When we went to the news break, I think we were talking with Shelley in Monterey. So let me bring Shelley back up, okay? Shelley, we wanted you. You were on a roll. We want you to continue it here and finish up.
Oh, okay. I was just yesterday. I was listening to your mom give the birthday poem. That was just really touching. I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh, wow. So we're finally, yeah. I mentioned it to Billy, our director of production, that we want to start playing Kay's commentaries, in honor of her for many, we have hundreds of them, literally. I wasn't aware that they had started again, but that's great.
Yes.
Oh, you know what it was? You know what it was? Here's what it was. It was a Saturday special that was produced in 2011. It must have been between 2 and 4 p.m., because that's when we do reruns of classic Saturday specials. And we used to world premiere, debut each K's commentary on the Saturday special, and then play it for a week after that. Yeah. But we're going to be playing them regularly very soon, I promise. But I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
But anyway, Dr. Wallach, thank you for existing and doing what you do.
Thank you.
I got to tell you, I can't tell you how much you've helped me, and I just listen to when you're speaking to the people that call in, and so much stuff that I've learned from just listening to you. So thank you so much. You.
Okay.
And then
take 2 minutes. Let me just take 2 minutes and tell the story you were talking about, how I figured this out when I was 9 years old. Okay, I think that's the story you're talking about.
Yes.
When I was 4 years old, I started having behavioral problems, and we lived on a little Angus farm out in the middle of central Missouri. And to make a long story short, over a period of 5 years, between ages 4 and 9, my mom and dad took me to 20 different doctors. They were everything from behavioralists to they didn't have a name for what I had back then. Today it would be autism and violent schizophrenia and so forth. But back then they didn't have names for it. And I went to 20 different doctors. And the last one was a pediatrician from St. Louis, Missouri. Her name was Mary Jane Skeffington. I'll never forget, little grandmotherly type gal. And she said, we have to institutionalize him. And I said, well, Mom, what does that mean? She said, well, they're going to put you in the hospital. And I said, well, how long am I going to be there? She said, well, maybe for the rest of your life because you're too violent. You're going to hurt somebody. And so that night, when everybody else was in bed asleep, I'm sitting on the end of my bed, and I'm thinking, no, wait a minute. Why do I have this behavior that nobody likes? I'm only 9 years old. They don't have names for it yet, but nobody liked it. And so I said, no, wait a minute. Now, I'm feeding the vegetables and stuff from our garden to the animals, and they don't have the disease I have. And I thought, well, wait a minute. We're also giving them vitamins and minerals in addition to the vegetables from the garden and the corn from the garden, but we're not getting the vitamins and minerals. So the next morning, threw the Cheerios out in the lawn to the chickens, and I filled my pockets with little alfalfa pellets with, it had hay and that kind of stuff in there. And then I took all the vitamins and minerals that we were giving those calves, and I started taking them. In 3 days' time, Michael, your phone's ringing. In 3 days' time, I'm cured of something that had been getting worse and worse and worse. They're going to institutionalize me for life after 5 years. In 3 days' time, I cured myself by giving myself those vitamins and minerals. We didn't say anything, but in church just a couple of weeks later, people were whispering and pointing because they noticed that my behavior was totally different. And people started coming up to me and saying, well, I hear you can cure my diabetes. I said, ma'am, I'm only 9 years old. I don't even know what diabetes is. So I started looking it up and saw that it was a nutritional deficiency in animals. And I would give this lady the nutrients, and we'd give an animal that had type 2 diabetes and cured her. Okay, I was only 9. So I figured it out when I was 9.
That's amazing and very inspiring. And thank you, Dr. Wallach, for always thanking our servicemen and women at the end of your show. My daughter is a Marine. Yes. So I really appreciate you giving homage to them.
By the way, Doc is going to be on with George Norrie, I think, this coming Tuesday night. From 10 p.m. to midnight. And the first 2 hours of his show approximately every 6 weeks. Doc is on, and then staggered with that, so also every 6 weeks, but, no more than 3 weeks go by without either Doc or Pharmacist Ben being a guest on the Coast to Coast show that millions and millions of people hear. So,
MZ, if I ever come into the fortunate of a large sum of money, you'll be getting half of it to keep that show and keep KSCO running forever. Just know that.
Oh, bless you. Thanks very much. Okay, so thank you. That's Shelley in Monterey. Let's take our next caller, and that would be Susan in San Jose.
Hi.
Susan. Hi, Susan. You're on with Doc Wallach, Dr. Lipton, the Futures, and poor old MZ, and Dr. Wallach. So.
I don't get to. I was in the car when you were talking, so I wasn't able to write down the things I wanted to. But I'll just give you a quick, because I know you've got people waiting. I'm 75. I'm an Australian, raised on pure food pretty much. My grandmother gave my grandfather vitamins. Both of them lived to late 90s. And when I came over here, over a period of time, I got arthritis, right? And then I fell and triple compound fractured my ankle. So I ended up, over the last 20 years, both hips replaced, knee replaced. The second hip, the doctor messed something up and the sciatic nerve got damaged. So I'm dealing with a tremendous amount of pain. Then I ended up with carpal tunnel syndrome severe because in all this time I've played music. I've been in a lot of bands, percussion. So I'm suffering, pain-wise I'm suffering. But over the time I've heard you talk, I've heard a lot of things on this. When the virus hit in January or February, I just went into immune system mode. I've been taking a lot of vitamins, but I heard one of you guys talk about niacin and D3 and what were the others? Anyway, that's what I started taking, probiotics, intestinal, things to help the intestine, and bile. But how do you compensate with all the vitamins having to take pain medication? What's the balance? Because I know that can't be that.
One, Michael?
Yeah, go, please, Doc.
Okay. Well, first of all, your doctors made a mistake in the first place. Instead of giving hip replacements and knee replacements, so you should have gotten on the Healthy Bone and Joint Pack, which I deal with professional athletes and Olympic athletes and movie stars and very famous politicians and pictures. And I rebuild their cartilage and ligaments and tendons and connective tissues so they never have to have the surgery. Okay?
Right.
Because all of these things have nothing to do with age. They have to do with osteoporosis, which is a multiple mineral and vitamin deficiency. So he came up with a program. If you take that, wait a minute, if you take that according to your body weight, it will rebuild all of your cartilage and ligaments and tendons, connective tissue, bones. And I actually have a new book out. It's called, as Michael said, I always have a new book out. It's a new book. It's called It's All in Your Head, and goes into the 25 different diseases you can.
Can you let me write that down real quick? I have a hard time writing.
Yeah, well, you just get this recording. We can't stop the whole show. We'd love to, Susan, but we can't do that. So you can always get a recording on demand at KSCO.com, at ZBSradio.com, or any of our free apps. Okay?
Good.
Anytime, on demand. Okay, go ahead, Doc.
Okay, and so to finish up here, again, I take people, very famous people who have everything from heart disease to they're on kidney dialysis for 25 years. The last 10 years they haven't urinated, so they're on dialysis 6 days a week. In 2 weeks' time, they're urinating. In 4 weeks' time, they're off of dialysis after 25 years, because these things are all caused by nutritional deficiencies, and the doctors are just treating the patients for the symptoms and milking them and their accounts like a cow. They're using the patients as an ATM machine so they can pay for the tuition for their 3 sons to go to college. I get rid of the problems in 90 days with a supplement program for over 600 different diseases. And I actually have a brand new CD and DVD set. It's called Is Your Doctor Killing You? Is Your Doctor Killing You? And the co-author is a pharmacist Keith Abel from Louisville, Kentucky. And he was interviewing me. As you can imagine, a pharmacist, I mean, he was raking me over the coals. He was interviewing me. I was able to prove that all these things that doctors were using surgery for and all these drugs and everything, that I could get rid of them in just weeks. After years and years and years of these people suffering, I could get rid of the diseases in weeks with a supplement program and a change in diet. And so, again, the new CD and the new DVD is called Is Your Doctor Killing You?
Is your doctor? Okay.
I just wanted to add to Dr. Wallach's statement about that. And having been a professor in the medical school for a long time, I have to emphasize something very clear here, is that the education in medical school is actually influenced profoundly by the pharmaceutical drug company and the money involved with it, which is connected to the AMA and the FDA. They're all involved in this. And so when I was teaching in the medical school, the pharmaceutical industry had a profound influence on shaping medical practice more than it should have. And as a result, doctors don't get a full understanding of the nature of our nutrition. I mean, until recently, nutrition wasn't even taught in medical school. And more importantly, they're given a manual. This is what you do. And if you don't follow what's called standard practice, then a physician loses their license by not following the rules that are set up. And they didn't set up the rules. They're really set up by AMA and pharmaceutical and FDA, and these are agencies that are very much influenced by the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay, we're going to move on. Thank you, Susan, for your call. Go ahead, Doc.
Here, Michael. Yeah, Bruce, my answer to that, you said that very perfectly, because, I taught in medical school, Milan taught in medical school at Harvard, is to go back to school and become a veterinarian. Treat your patients like a dog, and they all get better.
If patients would treat themselves as they treat their dogs, they would all get better.
All right.
That's right.
Okay, let's go to our next caller, and that would be David in San Francisco. David, you're on the air with Doc Wallach and Dr. Lipton and the gang.
Yeah, hey, Michael and doctors. I wanted to ask you two questions about COVID. One, I'd basically been a fan of Dr. Wallach's for years, and so the whole idea of nutrition during an epidemic, thing I started going for was dark leafy greens. Your vitamin A, and then the iron that comes from that. And if it's a respiratory disease, you want to put that iron in your blood so that you can carry the oxygen through your system, and that'll decrease your odds of, choking to death in your lungs. So I'm wondering if he's got any nutrition advice specifically for COVID. But the second question was about your epigenetics, and if I understand right, this is a brand new disease. It's not a something that's been around for centuries or eons.
You said disease, David. You mean science, right?
Well, it's a condition, let's say. If I understand...
COVID.
Yeah, COVID, right. Yeah, I mean, it's like say, for example, it's a virus is not alive, but it's like a mineral that you're very allergic to. And it's got a fatty coating on it, which keeps you from getting hit by it. But if that fatty coating breaks apart while it's in your lungs, it'll make you go into allergic reactions and create so much pus that you drown in your own pus. And so, this idea, whether this is a new disease, whether it's a pollution disease, and if it's a pollution disease, then your epigenetics means that a woman, like epigenetics means that the woman can pass on an immunity to the baby. But if it's a pollution-based disease, would she be turning that baby into a mutant to deal with...
Okay, well, let me interrupt here because you're getting everything wrong. You got 100% wrong. Okay?
Okay.
Epigenetics, as Michael says, is a science. And you go back to the beginning of history, written history, and pandemics would come along every 5 to 10 years. Pandemics would come along every 5 to 10 years. And, there'd be a certain amount of herd immunity amongst the human population. They'd get immune to it. And then 5 or 10 years would go by, and suddenly now they'd get another pandemic come through. It was a different bug, okay? And this has been going on since the beginning of written history. So this is nothing new, okay? It's nothing new. But you have to appreciate that let's go back 100 years ago when the Spanish flu came through. In India, India had been eating wheat for 10,000 years. There was a wild grass in India. And so just about everybody in India was eating wheat. And in a 6-month period, 110 million people got the Spanish flu in India, and 20 million died, okay, in just 6 months' time in India. I mean, there were bodies plugging the rivers, damming up the rivers. They were dying at 10,000 an hour. They couldn't bury them fast enough. They were throwing all the bodies in the river. Okay. After the First World War in 1918, half of India switched to rice, okay, because they could get more tonnage per acre in the swamps with rice than they could wheat. And if you look at the statistics in India today, they have 29 states and 7 territories. And India, when you look at the top 10, which is 30% of their territories, okay, is in northern India. They have 95% of the deaths from the COVID infection. They have 86% of the infections of COVID. In the southern half of India, which has 2/3 of the Indian population, all the same type of people, they're eating rice. They only have 5% of the deaths and only 14% of the infections. So what's the difference between the southern 2/3 of the population and the northern 1/3 of the population? The northern 1/3 are still eating wheat. They have a problem with the gluten, damaging their intestines. They cannot absorb any optimal amounts of nutrients, so their bone marrow is dead. They don't make platelets. They don't make white blood cells. They don't make antibodies. Whereas the ones in the south, they all live on rice. Their intestines are perfectly normal. They're able to absorb minerals because their intestines are healthy. And so they're able to fight off the COVID and only have 5% of the deaths and only 14% of the illnesses, where the ones who are eating wheat in the north have 95% of the deaths and 86% of the illnesses. And so this is the sort of stuff I look at, and this is a COVID thing as opposed to the Spanish flu, but they're kind of cousins. The Spanish flu is H1N1 virus. This is the COVID-19 virus. They're very similar cousins. And so when they come out with the, let's see here, they're going to come out with a vaccine here pretty soon. And when they do, it'll quiet things down for a couple of years, and then another pandemic will come along because people have not stopped eating spaghetti every Wednesday night at Spaghetti Factory. They have not given up eating waffles and pancakes for breakfast. Okay, they got to live like Asians, live on rice and sweet potatoes and eggs and fish and poultry and red meat, but none of the bad foods. So their immune system, which is their intestines and their bone marrow, are intact, and they'll be able to absorb the minerals, which are the food for your bone marrow to defend you.
Doc, before I forget, I've been meaning to ask you this for a long time. What about rice gluten?
There is no such thing as rice gluten.
Oh, okay.
There is no gluten in rice. There's no gluten in rice. In other words, if you like to drink beer, you can drink Japanese and Chinese beer because they're made from rice.
Uh-huh.
Okay? You can drink vodka because it's made from potatoes.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
okay, but you cannot have American beer or Australian beer because they're made from wheat, barley, rye, and oats.
Yeah, I get it that wheat is bad, but when I saw just yesterday, I saw the first number one ingredient on something that was Asian that I was about to. I like to go shopping at Asian markets, and the first ingredient was rice gluten. And I said, "Oh, rice gluten. Let me ask Doc about that." And you say there is no rice gluten. Well, there's rice gluten listed as the first ingredient on what I.
Well, you need to call. You need to call the phone number and say, "Now, is wheat flour gluten added to the rice?
Yeah.
Or they just make up a word?" Okay. There is rice flour, okay, which they can use as a thickener, like they use wheat gluten for, right? But there is no such thing as gluten. When you look at the definition of gluten, okay, it's a kind of it's a connective tissue stuff made from wheat, barley, rye, and oats. People say, well, I get gluten-free oats. Well, there are no such things as gluten-free oats because the gluten in oats is called gliadin. Even though they call it gliadin, it's still gluten. But there are no such things as rice gluten. There is a rice flour, which can be used as a thickener. Okay.
I'm going to follow up on that and let you know.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm just looking that up online right here, and if you got short grain rice, it's kind of dusty, and it's imitative of gluten, but the articles say that the doctor's right, there is no such thing as gluten in rice, but it's short grain rice tends to be thick. You know, like if you make a pot of rice, it'll tend to be thick instead of thin.
Yeah.
And that thick is the imitative of the gluten in rice. So it's really just rice dust that isn't washed off.
Yeah, rice flour dust, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
David, thanks for calling 479-1080. Now we go on to Cameron in Aptos. Thanks for waiting, Cameron. You're on the air.
Okay. David, thanks for calling 479.
Please turn off the radio.
Thanks for waiting, Cameron. You're on the air.
Okay, I guess we're going to... Please turn off the radio because it's really upsetting the broadcast. Okay, go ahead. You're on.
Hi. I've been listening. It's fascinating. Thank you so much, Michael. It's a wonderful show.
Thank you.
What I'd like to know, particularly following the conversation about India, where can I find that article about the difference between rice and wheat? That's one question. Two, is it the best thing we can do is to eliminate wheat from our diet and switch to rice and then get a lot of nutrients? And number three, is there some kind of graph where you can say, I have these three pre-existing conditions and I should add these minerals and not eat these foods in order to better improve my health?
Okay, let's start with the last one first. Okay, and the answer is yes. You want to go to what we call the quartet of books, Let's Play Doctor, Let's Play Herbal Doctor, Passport Aromatherapy, and it's all in your head. Covers 600 different diseases and answers those questions. Okay, the question, where did I get all that information about the differences in the rice and the wheat in India? It's from the World Health Organization. It took me hours of going through stuff, but this is, it's recorded now, but I got the data. It's from the World Health Organization, so it's not like I'm taking it from some grandmother somewhere. This is from the World Health Organization. Was there a disparity in the locations in India where people had different rates of infection and deaths? And boy, it popped up like crazy, and so it's very well documented. And I forget, what was the first part of the question?
Well, imagine a graph where if I say I have diabetes and high blood pressure, and
okay, stop.
And then what do you not?
Okay,
what do you take and not? Yes.
Okay.
So it's like what?
Okay, so when you have diabetes and high blood pressure, you have to give up all the bad foods that contributed to the problem. No fried foods, no processed meats with nitrates and nitrites, no wheat, barley, rye, and oats, no oils of any kind, no wheat, barley, rye, and oats, and no sugar. And then per 100 pounds of body weight, I'm going to take one healthy blood sugar pack per month, per 100 pounds of body weight. If you only weigh 110, I'd get an extra bottle of our sweeties. You could take 3 of those twice a day. Don't cold turkey off your medication, but as your blood sugar drops, your A1C numbers, A1C numbers drop, you can slowly reduce your medication based on the numbers. And then for the high blood pressure, I would throw in the Ultimate Daily Classic tablets, 3 of those twice a day per 100 pounds of body weight. And usually, I don't care if you've had high blood pressure for 30 years, in 30 to 60 days, your blood pressure issues are gone, your diabetes is gone, because both of them are simple nutritional deficiency diseases. They're not genetic, they're not autoimmune, but they are secondary to eating gluten, because even if you're supplementing with the right nutrients, you can't absorb the nutrients because your intestines are dead, because the gluten kills your intestines. That's why people get irritable bowel syndrome, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, celiac disease, diverticulitis. All those are caused by a gluten issue. You get off of gluten and run away from the doctors.
Okay.
Thank you.
All righty. Thanks very much for calling 479-1080. Here is the next caller, Claire in Brookdale. Let's see. Go ahead, Claire. You're on.
Hi, just a quick comment. I know that we learn from pregnancy when we think negative thoughts. Those create catecholamines that go directly to our babies. And when we think positive thoughts, those thoughts, go directly to our babies. And, just as in, fighting disease and everything else, there is a definite choice that you make to think positively or negatively about something, and there's a definite physical effect from that. I am a survivor of a ovarian cyst surgery that was growing cancerous, and I've had a complication of a seroma now from a hernia, which was a complication of the original surgery that I've been going through. So my health situation has gone back 5 years, but I've tried to stay completely positive through this whole experience, and luckily my cancer isn't gone from my body. They were able to remove it and hasn't come back, and luckily my seroma, through my positive thinking, is definitely going away, even though it's taking a while. So the same feelings that you feel, that butterflies in your stomach feeling, is the same feeling that you get whether you're in love or whether you're in fear. And people don't recognize that feeling. You have a choice at that moment. Which are you going to think in love, or are you going to think in fear? And hopefully people will choose to think in love more often.
This is a really valid point, because as we talked about, the consciousness that you express is influenced by the secretions of the brain, which go in as the information component of the blood, but that mother's blood is actually what goes to the fetus. And when we were in medical school, or when I was teaching medical school years ago, we used to say, well, the mother's job is to provide nutrition, so eat well, take vitamins and supplements, exercise. And that was primary directive for women. But ever since the understanding of epigenetics, now the whole thing has also changed very much, because now we recognize it's not just nutrition that the baby is responding to, that the baby is responding to the mother's chemistry in regard to her consciousness. And there's a reason for this, and it's very important, because nature doesn't know what the future is going to be. So when a baby is created from the fertilization of an egg, the baby is not necessarily designed for one environment or another environment. And what the mother represents is nature's Head Start program. The mother is the one living in the world, examining what's going on, see what's going on, and if she's not supported, or the world's in strife, or that she feels compromised, then the fetus is getting that information that the world out there is not that safe, and that changes the blood flow in the fetus. because now the baby is going to be genetically designed to be like a street fighter, in a sense that when it's born, if the world's not safe, a street fighter has a much better chance of surviving than a more intelligent baby. And interesting fact, the stress hormones, if a mother has a lot of stress in her life, those stress hormones, when going into the fetus, redirect the blood flow, as we mentioned earlier. And part of that blood flow, is a very important part, is when you're in a fight or flight situation, you don't use conscious reasoning and thinking and logic. When you're in a fight or flight, you are in reaction behavior, reflex behavior. That's hindbrain. And as I mentioned before, that the blood vessels in the gut constrict when you're with stress hormones, the blood vessels in the prefrontal cortex, the consciousness part, also constrict. And that results in the blood being preferentially sent to the hindbrain, where this is where the basic life-sustaining responses are going to come from. The point is, when blood nourishes the tissues, and when tissues are deprived of blood, they don't develop very well. And so my conclusion that I wanted to get that was so important is that when a woman is highly stressed, and the stress hormones are now going into the blood that's going into the placenta, it can reduce the intelligence of a child by 50% by shutting down the growth of the conscious brain, but enhancing the growth of the hindbrain, which is real important for reflex fighting, survival.
Okay, great.
I find it.
Hope that helped, Claire. But we got to move on because we have quite a lot of other callers here. Okay.
It is. Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate your program. Thank you. And if Michael Zwerling wants to talk about navigating the county process for all these fire victims, he can feel free to invite me another day.
Oh, okay, great. Well, send an email to mz@ksco.com.
I will. Thank you.
Please, thank you. Okay, there goes Claire. Here comes. Joanna. Hi, Joanna. About adrenal health. Go ahead, Diana. You're on. Joanna. Jeez, what's wrong with my brain?
I've been living with severe adrenal fatigue for over 20 years, and I take the tangy tangerine. But I'm wondering if there are specific supplements to rebuild adrenal health.
Yes, and of course, what I would do is make sure you're staying away from all the bad stuff so you can maximize absorption, right? So you're going to get the benefit of your dollars here. No fried foods, no processed meats, no oils of any kind, no gluten, no wheat, no barley, rye, and oats, no sugar. You got to live like an Asian, live on rice and sweet potatoes, eggs. So you have to appreciate that hormones, including adrenal hormones, are made from cholesterol. You cannot be on statin drugs. You have to eat, say, 3 eggs twice a day per 100 pounds of body weight with soft yolks, soft boiled yolks, soft poached soft yolks, soft scrambled in butter. Okay, hard-boiled eggs don't count. And then I would also throw in, per 100 pounds of body weight, what we call our Healthy Brain and Heart Pack. Our Healthy Brain and Heart Pack has 225 nutrients in it, including the 90 essential nutrients. I would also throw in for the adrenal health, okay, I would throw in what we call the pollen burst. Pollen burst. It has SOD, superoxide dismutase in it. It quiets down all these sort of free radicals floating around in the blood, okay, which puts a lot of pressure on your adrenal glands. But getting rid of all the bad foods, the fried foods, the processed meats, the oils, the gluten, the wheat, barley, rye, and oats, that's a big, big help because those things cause an enormous amount of inflammation in all tissues. You do have to eat the eggs. Your doctor will say, don't eat eggs. That doctor should be put in jail for that, okay? You need to eat eggs with soft yolks. Hard-boiled eggs don't count. And, you will be amazed when you take the 90 essential nutrients and stay away from all the bad foods.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Hope that helped you, Joanna. Okay, now let me. I want to ask you a question real quick about stress, which a wise man once told me must be viewed as a disease-causing entity. Okay, and I believe that. And one of our products, one of the longevity products, is called D, the letter D, dash stress. Okay. And I've been taking a good amount of that lately, Doc, and it works. It really, really, really does. I've been a whole lot less stressed than when I wasn't taking it. It's amazing.
Okay, well, de-stress, of course, as the name implies, it's a set of nutrients that are necessary for the proper brain metabolism, okay? And so all the hormones are going the right direction. You need some of our expectorant.
You know, I had my mic off, but the other mics were turned on, so... Yeah. Now, what expectorant is that? I'm sorry, I should know, but what's the name of the product?
Cell Shield RTQ.
Okay, done. I'm gonna go swallow a bottle of it right after the show today.
Yeah, but de-stress capsules, I throw that in everything from any time people have. There's eight different dementias. Okay, I throw in the de-stress because many of them are caused by these nutritional deficiencies. Okay, and there's no reason why you can't have all 8 dementias. There's no rule that says you only have one dementia. You need 3 eggs twice a day, with at least with soft yolks. I also like the Ultimate Niacin Plus, one of those twice a day per 100 pounds of body weight for another set of dementias. Then the Ultimate Daily Classic Tablets, 3 of those twice a day per 100 pounds of body weight because of vascular dementia. And then when it comes to, again, the de-stress, I also give it when people have congestive heart failure, because congestive heart failure is actually caused by deficiency of a single vitamin. It was one of the more common causes of death in sailors 300 years ago, along with scurvy, which is, vitamin C. Everybody knows about scurvy, vitamin C. But also, there's all these other things called beriberi and pellagra and so forth. Well, beriberi was caused by a deficiency of a particular nutrient, and the terminal event of beriberi was congestive heart failure in those sailors. And so we use that de-stress product for just about everybody who has any kind of degenerative disease of the brain, the heart, the cardiovascular system.
It's loaded with B vitamins of all kinds, huh? Yeah, that's great.
Well, they're cofactors. They're cofactors for your brain makes hormones. What does your brain require to make hormones? Well, it needs the cholesterol from the eggs, but also requires the cofactors for all the equipment to work in the brain to do their job. Okay?
Very good. All righty, we're going to take our next caller now, and that will be Dick in Santa Cruz, about meditation and stress. Hey, Dick, you're on.
Hey, how's it going? I have a short little story. I had an ablation, which Dr. Wallach probably is going terrible. I probably wouldn't have had it after I discovered I had my vagus nerve was being excited by my digestive system, and I went into a rapid heartbeat. So I had the ablation done, and my heart after that for about a year pounded like crazy at night. So I started meditating, and it took care of it pretty quickly. So I just wanted to throw that out. If you guys had any comments about how meditation could, generally speaking, could heal the body.
Well,
that to Bruce, yeah.
Oh, thanks, Joe. Meditation then is what? Is it changing of thought processes that disconnects from the stress, which is everywhere all the time nowadays. I've been talking about the negative effects of stress. And you might say, well, why did evolution create this problem? And I go, no, evolution didn't create the problem, because when stress was a problem back in evolution, it was the stress from running away perhaps from that saber-toothed tiger. The question is what about that stress? I said, well, once you escape the tiger, there was no more stress, and then the system returned back to normal growth and maintenance of the body. So that basically says we were never designed to be in prolonged stress. That stress was supposed to be just a short interaction, survive, get out, and get back into growth again. And this is where everything has gone wrong in today's world, because stress is 24/7, 365 on this planet. We were never designed as physiological bodies to be in stress as chronically as it is. And meditation is one of the key ways of reducing that stress and calming the body back down. So like your heartbeat that you were feeling swelling would start to slow down and be less noticeable through your meditation, because you were trying to calm the system back down and get it back into a growth state rather than a reactive stress state. Joel, you want to expand on that?
Yeah, thank you. But that was great. Thank you very much, Bruce. Okay, now there's two main causes of atrial fibrillation, irregular heartbeat. One is shrinking. Did you shrink any in height?
No, I'm stronger than ever, Dr. Wallach. I'm taking all your minerals.
Well, the answer is no. Okay,
No.
The answer is no. Okay, then do you have any ringing in the ears? Do you have any tinnitus like the noise?
No.
Okay.
I know what it is.
Okay, stop. Do you have any dental problems?
Nope.
Okay, well, here's the deal. When doctors want to give you an ablation, which is killing a portion of your heart muscle that they believe may be driving the heart to have an irregular heartbeat, it's called AFib, atrial fibrillation, and it's almost always due to osteoporosis of the skull, which squeezes the 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve, which controls the rate and rhythm of the heart. You're going to shrink because you have degenerative disc disease, and the first four thoracic vertebrae begin to squeeze the first four thoracic spinal nerves coming out of your spinal cord, which also can, in that situation, can cause atrial fibrillation. And there's a guy by the name of Elijah Cummings, who, 68 years old, he was a U.S. congressman from the state of Maryland, from Baltimore, Maryland, and they convinced him he was going to have a stroke because of his AFib if he didn't get ablation. So they took him to Johns Hopkins, a medical school. They took him to the surgery room. They got two cardiologists. They anesthetized him, cut his chest open, took a hot soldering iron and touched his heart with it, and immediately killed him.
Yeah. Well, I wish I hadn't gotten my ablation.
Yeah. Well, you survived. You did better. You did better than Elijah Cummings did. So congratulations. But what you need to do is get on. Okay. How much do you weigh?
He already is, Doc. He was trying to tell you. He's been taking your products, and that's probably why he's still here.
Yes, but I don't know how much he weighs. I want you to take, per 100 pounds of body weight, I want you to take one healthy brain and heart pack per month. Okay, I want you to get the MSM, so you can take 3 of those twice a day per 100 pounds of body weight as one bottle a month. So you can rebuild the cartilage, ligaments, tendons, connective tissue, disc between the vertebrae, bone matrix in the skull. You get a hold of this book. It's all in your head. It's all in your head. And the AFib is the first one we talk about. Okay, atrial fibrillation. It says cranial nerve number 10. Okay, cranial nerve number 10, the vagus nerve. Do you ever have any hiccups?
Yes, it was a digestive thing. My vagus nerve also goes down to your gut, doesn't it?
It goes to your stomach and causes what's called gastroparesis, extreme pain in the stomach.
Yes.
Can also, and they'll put down an endoscopic thing looking for ulcers.
I'm taking nightly essence.
Hiccups. Okay, perfect. Okay. You got
nightly essence.
All right. See, I think I was right. Okay. Hey, thank you very much for calling, Dick. Our next caller is going to be Craig in Los Gatos. Hey, Craig, you're on.
Yeah. Hey, Mike. Hey, Doc Wallach. What's wrong with good cold pressed olive oil? Then I have a question about masks.
Okay, all oils, including extra virgin olive oil, whether it's cold pressed or not, causes oxidative damage to your arteries and causes plaque and plugging of your arteries. It introduces cancer. Okay, if you want olive oil, you need to grow an olive orchard, pull the olive off the tree, and eat it. Do not take olive oil that's been put into a bottle or a can, or in some kind of container with fish or something like that. Olive oil oxidizes immediately when it contacts the air, becomes one of the most irritant, oxidative substance. It causes cancer, causes blockage in your arteries. Olive oil, what I would do is take any olive oil you have at home, wrap it up in a beautiful package with a beautiful ribbon in it, and give it with love to your doctor.
Well, they've been having olive oil out in the world for thousands of years.
Yes, but the average lifespan for thousands of years is like 45.
I don't know. What does the other doc feel about olive oil there?
Unfortunately, we need the oils. Some of them are very important because the most functioning part of the cell that determines its genetics and its fate is the cell membrane. And the cell membrane is basically 50% fat with a lot of cholesterol in it. And Dr. Wallach talked about the cholesterol is important. That's why eating the egg yolks was a really good thing. And if you look at the brain, it's a white organ. And I go, why is it white? Because it's basically all fat and lipids. And so we must have a certain amount of lipids to come into the diet to support this. And as Dr. Wallach mentioned before, there was this whole story of cutting out all the fats at some point. But the problem is that we need these fats. And one of the big issues about child development is when women, breast milk has the highest concentration of the best fats available because fats are stored energy, but also building blocks of the system. And that why it's relevant is there is no substitute for mother's milk in regard to the lipids. The baby formulas and all that, which people think is like a replacement, is one of perhaps the biggest problems in the world because the brain grows the first and fastest of all the organs in the body. And if you short the lipids of that baby, you totally compromise the development of the nervous system. So fats and oils, now olive oil that is aged in any way or a lot of sunlight has a lot of byproducts in it that the breakdown of the oil, that's destructive. So there's a difference between fresh olive oil and olive oil that's been stored a while, and you should take that into consideration. I'm not against the fats, especially since, excuse me, Dr. Wallach, I've been on the keto diet for a while, which emphasizes eating the fats and getting away from all the grain, which I think is where bigger problems come from. And so healthy oil is important. Egg yolks are indeed, as Dr. Wallach said, one of the primary sources of the lipids that we need. But I'm not totally personally banning oils in my life because fundamentally a major part of my biology is built on these oils.
Yes, you're exactly right. And I didn't say ban all the oils, but we have the essential fatty acids, the EFAs and EFA pluses. The EFAs come from seeds and the EFA pluses come from fish, but they're in soft shell capsules in nitrogen. They are protected. We put them in nitrogen. From the second they are extracted from their source, they're in a nitrogen atmosphere in the factory. They go into a soft shell capsule. They're in a nitrogen atmosphere in the soft shell capsule. The bottle is filled with nitrogen before it's sealed, and we protect the oil to protect the consumer. But if you don't protect the oil, like Bruce says, okay, you are in trouble if you're eating oil that's been even at room temperature on your table for overnight.
Yeah, they become oxidized, and that's a breakdown, and it's toxic to a degree.
Okay. Hope that helps, Greg. Now, let's see. Our next caller is Colonel Terry, the big ticket questions.
Hi, Doc. How are you?
Okay.
You in Santa Cruz this weekend?
No, he's not. He's not.
All right. Look, my big ticket reality questions, because as Doc remembers, I like to focus on what is reality. And is the reality, in his view, it came from the Chinese biological warfare research lab in Wuhan? Second, does he agree with Fauci's strategy on masks, distancing, hand washing, and so on? Third, what should be our national strategy to deal with it? Fourth, what are the most prudent, smartest things every USA citizen in our household and family can do and should do? And five, what predictions do you see 3 years down the road?
Okay.
Many
hey,
different
Terry,
points.
why couldn't you just do one question? Why do you have to overload us all?
Basically, you got to get rid of all the bad foods to maximize absorption of the good stuff. No fried foods, no processed meats, no oils, no glutens, no wheat, butter, rye, oats, no sugar. Then you need to understand by getting off of gluten, your intestines will begin to heal. You'll be able to absorb the nutrients necessary to make your bone marrow work and make white blood cells to go through the bloodstream and kill and eat the viruses, okay? You also need to, people, they go into the doctor once a month to get iron shots and B12 shots because they can't absorb it orally because their intestines are dead. But, okay? And so you have to do that. They need to take the 90 essential nutrients, the healthy brain and heart pack, do that. And then when it comes down to Fauci, there's nothing wrong with wearing a mask. I mean, I do when I go out. I'm 81 years old, so I wear a mask. I do social distance. But you still need to give your body all it needs to be able to make the antibodies, and to make the white blood cells and the red blood cell platelets to defend you. And so that's where the 90 essential nutrients come in. The mask alone aren't going to do it. The social distancing aren't going to do it. It flattens the curve, and then everybody gets excited, and they throw a big party, and then everybody gets infected again because they haven't dealt with the underlying problem, no nutrition to the bone marrow, okay? That's got to do with that. And as I said earlier, when they come up with a vaccine for this COVID, which they will, and then it'll be 5 or 10 years, there'll be another pandemic come through because they haven't dealt with the basic problem of getting rid of the gluten. They need to live like an Asian, live on rice and sweet potatoes, no gluten. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
Okay, Bruce. Bruce has something.
Yeah, when we start to understand the nature of the immune system, again, I want to emphasize one of the very important factors, which is being completely overwhelming the public, is the nature of fear, the fear of death. If we were 2 or 3 years ago and I said the flu is coming, everybody goes, yeah, okay, and some of us will get flu shots. But if I say this year the flu is coming, you're all going to die, that changes the consciousness of the entire population. Now they're living in fear because this is a deadly thing. And I say, well, first of all, let me correct a factor that's really important. Mortality rate of a disease is based on how many people died versus how many people are reported to have the disease. It's a fraction. You divide the number of people with the disease into the number of people that died, and you get a percent of how many people die. If 5 people die and 10 people had the disease, we say 50% mortality. But if 100 people have the disease and 5 people died, it's like 20% mortality. And the more the number on the bottom, the more the number of cases identified gets bigger and bigger, the mortality rate drops precipitously. So the original scare was, oh my God, the number of people that showed up with the disease. And I say show up, yeah, they went to a doctor or they went to a hospital and they were recorded to have the disease, and the number of people that died was really high. And all of a sudden they said, oh my God, the mortality rate is fantastically high. Millions of people are going to die. But now that they started doing wide-range testing, and they find over 90% of the people have the COVID are not seriously affected. They didn't go to a doctor. They didn't go to a hospital. They had a flu, which didn't require them to go make a report. And I say, so why is it relevant? Take all the numbers of the people now that we know that have the COVID and then divide that into the number of deaths. The percentages are above normal, but not in the radical range that we've been talking about. They have to readjust and revise the death toll. And more importantly, and this is in support of Dr. Wallach's work, is that why do some populations like the U.S. population have more mortality? It's not because the virus is more virulent, it's because their physiology is more compromised. As Dr. Wallach is emphasizing, their nutrition is compromised, they're stressed out. You add all these things together, and U.S. has a higher mortality rate, not because the virus is more virulent. It is not. It is more virulent than a conventional one, and there's a reason why. Because every year when a flu comes, it's a variation of one of the viruses. In fact, the coronavirus that's associated with COVID is a standard cold virus. And I go, so why is it so more virulent? And that is because this version of the virus that has now come out, we haven't had it in the human population enough that people have a history, and a history provides memory. And that's why if you got like chicken pox as a kid, you may not get chicken pox when you're adult, you have memory. But if you never had this flu virus and then you get it, there's going to be a response.
Hey, guess what? That's the end of the show.
No.
So apologies to Nick and Cindy and Leroy and so forth. That's it. Thanks to Dr. Wallach, thanks to Dr. Bruce, thanks to Dr. Mrs. Future, and that's it. See you next week, folks.